If you're a fan of Hunter x Hunter, then for the love of Meruem, please subscribe to this channel for regular updates straight to your YouTube feed. These humans are definitely foolish creatures. Think as hard as those weak brain cells of yours can manage and tell me, do you humans ever listen to the cries of mercy coming from the pigs and cows that you slaughter? I didn't think so. Hello and welcome to Hunter x Hunter 101, the series that breaks down everyone and everything in the Hunter x Hunter world. And today it's time to examine a race of creatures that came close to bringing the entirety of humanity to the brink of extinction with the Chimera Ants. Chimera ants are a breed of creature in the Hunter x Hunter world, well known to the realm of humanity. However, they also have much larger cousins that exist on the landmass known as the Dark Continent. And these giant ants are going to be the ones that we primarily focus on here today. Chimera ants generally take many traits from real-life ants, but with one exceptionally important difference, which would go on to redefine them as a species. And that is their queen's method of reproduction being phagogenesis. And this is essentially a process whereby an organism consumes food in order to produce offspring, rather than a more standard method of breeding. As a result, the genetic information imparted onto the offspring comes directly from the food source. So that might not sound so great to us, because if we say eat spaghetti bolognese and then give birth to a tomato, humanity probably, well, it wouldn't be in a good place. However, to a species that could wield it effectively, it can lead to evolution on a scale of world domination. I should also probably note that despite the legit scientific sounding name that is phagogenesis, this does not actually exist in the real world, just in case any of you were wondering. But as fate would have it, Chimera Ant Queen would find her way from the Dark Continent to the human realm, contained within Lake Mobius. And so, as was her natural biological drive, she immediately set about spawning a colony. And this queen would go on to feed on many of the human realm's familiar animals, as well as eventually a large quantity of humans themselves. And I want to say right here and now that feeding on humans would not only lead to the greatest strengths of the Chimera Ant colony, but also to its greatest detriment. Oh, and it's also incredibly important to flag that these ants would, by and large, also figure out how to wield the complexities of Nen as a result of human consumption, which, as you'll go on to see, is downright terrifying. However, with this in mind, the Queen's colony was built up rather rapidly, without much notice from the outside world, due to the Queen having ended up on the shores of NGL, the Neo-Green Life Autonomous Region, a part of the world that has made a conscious decision to reject modern technology and live a simpler life. And as such, the humans living in NGL made for some very easy initial food for the colony. Speaking of, a Chimera Ant colony consists of a military-esque chain of command, and it all commences right at the top with a queen. Without a queen, there is no colony. It's that simple. So most colonies do start their lives with but a single queen who hunts for food on her own until she has birthed enough soldiers to procure food for her. The queen also has the responsibility of selecting a location to serve as a nest, in which she will spend the large majority of her life constantly consuming resources in order to eventually give birth to a king, and we will get back to the king in a second. But as you may have noticed, there are a couple of other stages between the queen and the soldiers. This is due to the fact that as the queen gains more and more food provided by said soldiers, she can begin to make stronger tiers of ants, with the immediate upper level being that of the officers. And here we start to see some familiar faces, with some officers of Meruem's colony, including the ever-angry Ramot, the ever-brilliant Ikalgo, and the ever-uncreatively named Koala, who is an ant based on, yes, you guessed it, a koala. I mean, at the very least, it is nice to see some Australian representation in Hunter x Hunter. Above the officers, we have a tier of even greater authority known as squadron leaders, who each report directly to the queen herself. Each squadron leader has command of roughly 4 to 5 individual officers, who in turn lead 10 to 15 soldiers known as peons. But squadron leaders make up the large majority of Chimera ants that we are familiar with some well-known ones being Chitu, Melioron, Colt, Welfin, Leol, and the list goes on and on. But above this is where the serious power begins, because in preparation for birthing the king, the queen creates a royal guard tier, consisting of a handful of exceptionally powerful ants, whose primary objective is to rear the king into the world and to lead the colony with him, or to leave the nest and mate to produce the next queen. In the case of Meruem's colony, 3 royal guards were produced, being Nefapito, Shayapuf, and Menthuthuupi. And it should also be noted that the queen was responsible for naming all of the royal guard, and so I will forward all of my complaints directly to her when it comes to pronouncing the names of these individuals. But for now, I really do need to hammer home the point that even though the royal guard are only one tier removed from squadron leaders, these 3 figures are on an infinitely greater scale of power, especially in regards to Nen. Each of the royal guard were born with ungodly quantities of aura, with Knuckle estimating that Yupi's aura reserve exceeded that of 700,000 units, which for some perspective is 10 times the amount wielded by Hunter Extraordinaire Moral, and it can be assumed that the other royal guards share a similar quantity. And in addition to being born as natural geniuses in regards to Nen, the royal guard are also effectively superhumans, with unfathomable strength, speed, and intellect, making them nigh on impossible formidable opponents to defeat and the perfect protection for the king. Not that I guess the king really needs it in this case. And that of course brings us to the king, who in the case of this giant ant colony was Meruem. And he was born into this world with power far greater than any other being we've ever seen in the series, excluding Narnika of course. But Meruem's natural abilities, including that of Nen, make the royal guards look like a speck of sand on a desert planet. But what would these ants go on to do with the largest massive power we've ever seen in the series? Well, after being born, the king and his royal guards abandoned the colony, headed to the Republic of East Gorteau, and immediately commandeered a palace held by the Republic's dictator. From here, the plan was to initiate what was referred to as a sorting, whereby the nearly 5 million citizens of East Gorteau would be transformed into human ant hybrid soldiers capable of wielding Nen. Although it was estimated that only 1% of the population would have the strength to survive the sorting process, in theory resulting in an army of roughly 50,000 hybrids, which is still an awful lot of Nen-wielding ants, and an army easily capable of conquering the world. Speaking of, conquering the world was the next planned phase, and it was referred to as unification, although exactly how this would go about would change over the course of the Chimera Ant arc, mostly due to Meruem's ever-changing views on humanity. But with Meruem and the royal guards on their new life's mission, this left the rest of the colony spawned by the queen at a bit of a loss. The main issue is that the Chimera Ant queen had passed away whilst giving birth to Meruem, and most of the individuals in leadership positions felt distinctly separate from Meruem and the royal guard as a species, and so the remainder of the squadron leaders and their forces splintered off into the world. Of course, some of them would continue to serve Meruem, but many squadron leaders went off and did their own thing, such as Colt forming a truce with humans with the intent to stop Meruem, or Zazan creating a nest in Meteor City only to be dispatched by the Phantom Troop. But here's the thing though, the very fact that ants were having thoughts like this is very unlike and in many ways counterintuitive to what a Chimera Ant should be feeling, and that was due to the influence of humanity within their DNA. Human incorporation had brought with it a vast quantity of feelings, ideas, and ambition, and it was not secluded to the lower level life forms either, as even the royal guard each had their own personal struggles of inner turmoil to deal with over the course of the Chimera Ant arc. And Meruem in particular would also have an existence-changing influence from the realm of humans, although not so much in the form of his food, but in a character by the name of Komugi, who despite being blind, was an undefeatable Gungi player who pushed Meruem's thinking and planted the seeds of his respect for humanity. Although humankind would not simply sit and wait for their eventual demise, as by now the Hunter Association were well aware of the apocalyptic level danger presented by the Chimera Ants, and an extermination team was formed, led by the chairman of the association, Isaac Netero. This team didn't simply purely consist of humans either, but also some Chimera Ants who had defected, being Ikalgo, Melioron, and the newly crafted ant hybrid of Palm Siberia. And the crux of this plan was the extermination team splitting off into smaller groups, separating the king from his royal guard, and should all go well, killing them all and saving humanity. Of course, it didn't exactly go to plan though. In fact, there were only really two parts of the plan that did, with one being when Neferpita was killed by Gon, and the other with Netero versus Meruem. And although it did cost him his life, Netero was eventually able to cause Meruem's death, and in the process, the deaths of Yuppie and Shiapuf as well, with all three eventually falling victim to the secondary effects of an explosive known as the Poor Man's Rose. With that said, not all Chimera Ants were killed, and many of them do still remain in existence today, having been integrated into society and labeled as magical beasts. Also, while the sorting of the people of East Gorteau did not go as planned, the king and his royal guard did manage to forge themselves 5,000 Chimera Ant hybrids, the cocoons of which were acquired by the vice chairman of the Hunter Association, Pariston Hill, and all of whom have likely hatched by this time in the story, and it would seem that he now wields his own personal army of ant-human hybrids. Some more fun facts about Chimera Ants. In this world, Chimera Ants also go by a second name, which is gourmet ants. This name spawns from the fact that ants are notoriously picky about their food consumption choices, and this can be seen reflected in Meruem's colony, where a large number of ants developed a taste for gourmet humanity, aka Nen users. Interestingly enough, Chimera Ants who were crafted from human DNA seem to be capable of recollecting memories from their previous human existence, leading some of them to even consider themselves as the same person reborn. And while nothing has been confirmed in regards to this, a thought has been floated that this may be because of the human soul surviving past the phagogenesis process. Should Netero's original extermination plan have failed, there was allegedly a plan B that was on standby ready to go, although in the end it was unnecessary due to both Meruem's change of heart and his inevitable death from the Poor Man's Rose. And finally, a truly useless fact. In Meruem's colony, at one stage there existed a total of 36 squadron leaders, however in the series, only 31 of them were ever named. And that pretty much does it for the Chimera Ants. If you enjoyed this video and the content this channel produces in general, then please do consider donating to the New World Review Patreon, because the support of all of you amazing people is what continues to make this channel possible. And if Patreon isn't quite your style, then please do leave this video a like, share, or subscribe, because it also helps support this channel an incredible amount. And if you'd like to join the fun at any time, then please do head over to my Discord server, where a wide array of shenaniganry takes place on a daily basis. And finally, please do comment with who, what, or where you'd like to see featured on the next Hunter x Hunter 101. Will the anime of Hunter x Hunter ever come back? To be honest, unless they decide to reanimate everything we've already done, I kind of doubt it. The problem is that the manga hasn't even completed a single arc since the anime left off, not technically anyway. I mean, you can split the Dark Continent preparation and the Succession War up, but it's kind of pointless. And I think the best possible thing you could do is perhaps make an OVA focusing on the Hisoka and Crawler fight in Heaven's Arena. That could be a lot of fun, and maybe you could pepper in some Dark Continent stuff to fill it out and add some intrigue, but really there is very little to animate, sadly. You ever thought about doing a video on Berserk? Yes, I definitely have. It would be very heavily opinion based though, because I don't have the same kind of grasp on Berserk as I do with Hunter x Hunter or One Piece, so it would be very much an I like this because of this sort of video. But I think it's a pretty inevitable topic if this channel does keep up the general anime and manga direction, although that's a pretty big if. What kind of anime/manga inspired tattoo would you get? So I've thought about this quite a bit, and it would definitely be the Team Dai Gurren symbol from Gurren Lagann. The problem is, I just don't know where I would showcase such a glorious thing. If you have any ideas on where such a tattoo should go, then please do leave them in the comments below.